preliminary fiscal year 2020 budget general fund presentation. Dr. Scott, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's a distinct pleasure to be here tonight. I would like to thank my budget staff for their diligence and their work in putting this together. As you will see, the primary word that I would like to show you tonight is preliminary. This is the first cut that we've had. There's a lot of data we do not have yet. But specifically, I would like to thank Lisa Palente for her dedication. As you know, that she is retiring from the city the 17th of June.
Who approved that?
Unfortunately, she did.
Wait, what?
And so she has been just a stalwart aide for us over these last few weeks in putting together not only this budget, but in helping to train Lupe, who is our new budget manager. She was selected and appointed here a couple weeks ago. She feels like I have, that she's drinking out of a fire hose, so
Good.
we will
Is that
bring
why
her
she's
up to
smiling?
speed quite quickly. And also Kevin Fall, who is the revenue coordinator in there. Excuse me. So without their help and assistance, we could not have done this in a short period of time. So I would like to personally and professionally thank them for their dedication and their good work. So the first thing that we started to do in our budget preparation was to review the strategic goals that the council had set a few years back. And those are, number one, public safety; number two, infrastructure; three, quality of life; four, economic development; five, fiscal sustainability; and six, organizational excellence. So we hope that we've been able to identify all of the things that we will present tonight in context of these six goals and strategic objectives that you have given us. So for our presentation tonight, we would hope to be able to obtain council guidance regarding the FY20 general fund budget. Now this is only the general fund. The purpose is to present you with a very high-level preliminary budget, excuse me, with an agenda. We'll review the economic overview, a review of the top 10 general fund revenues, taxable property values, the ad valorem and millage history, a review of the city's preliminary 2020 revenue and expenditure estimates, and finally the CIP request for the general fund, capital fund, Fund 317. To begin with the economic overview, I always like to set whatever presentation I make in context somehow. So we'll go from the macro down to the micro, and I hope that will help you understand what context we have when we made some estimates for our revenues and expenses. The first one I'm presenting here is Federal Open Market Committee estimate of what the interest rates will be. Each dot that you see on that chart is a member of the Federal Open Market Committee. And this is the forecast of their midpoint on what the interest rates will be as far as the Fed funds rate over the next few years. You can see this goes out to 2019, 2020, 2021, and then longer. The general consensus is a fairly flat interest rate projection, with even the 2019 anticipating a potential of a rate decrease depending on what happens with the economy. The next chart is taken from the Congressional Budget Office economic forecast. The first item is for growth in GDP, or that's gross domestic product. That's the value of all economic activity and the market prices of all final goods and services for a specific period. So you can see on this chart, it has kicked up just a little bit, but it starts to slow down. And we think that's not necessarily a recession, but it's a slower rate of growth than we've had in the past. Down below that is the unemployment rate. We've had a really bountiful market here in terms of unemployment. It's at the lowest it's been in quite some time. We see a slight uptick in that, or the Congressional Budget Office does. That will put upward pressure on wages as companies are competing for short labor. And we have that same situation here in the city of Port Orange. The rate of inflation, the Fed's target is 2%. So you can see that line, the dotted line, is where the Fed would like to be. They think that's healthy growth. They anticipate a slight increase over that in the short term, but then narrowing back down to 2%. So what that tells me is a little bit of acceleration in 2019, 2020, but then settling down to a stable growth. And you can see that also on the next chart down, which is the 10-year Treasury note and the 3-month Treasury bill comparison. Whenever they get narrow like that, you can see there's a short-term compression of interest rates. That means a little bit of risk in the market on the short term, but you can see the 10-year is pretty stable, which means the long-term look that folks are anticipating in the market is relatively stable. Now looking at UCF from their Institute for Economic Forecasting, bringing a little bit closer to home.
Sean Snaith. Go Knights.
Question?
George on.
No.
Oh. As you see the yield curve, there's been some inversion in the yield curve, which means that the short term and the long term have kind of gone opposite. Usually the short term is a little lower and the long term is a little higher. But in this case here, you can see the 30-year, which is a solid line, has been generally trending down, but now it's trending back up for the foreseeable forecast, right along with the 5-year and the 1-year T-bill rates. So we see that we're probably going to be in a little rising interest rate in the near term, but then some stabilization as that curve starts to flatten out. In terms of, excuse me, the CPI in the South area, which is kind of the southern United States, it's been kind of all over the board there, going between 1% and 3%. You can see in the last part, or the first part of 2019, it's been trending down, but now the total all items rate has started to increase. What that leads me to believe is that things are stabilizing. You'll see the two lines starting to converge, the all items without food and energy and the all items. So again, to me, that's a indication of short-term and near-term stability. As far as the Florida summary, is kind of interesting statistics. Economic growth 2019 to 2022, they project Florida to have an average 3.2% economic growth, which is ahead of the U.S. at 2.7%. But interestingly enough also, it's slightly lower than the last 4 years, which was 3.3%. Housing continues to be a major market for Florida. Median single-family home is now $255,000. Back in the housing crisis, it was $122,000. So that's pretty significant growth.
Is that for all of Florida or just?
That's Florida, yes, all of Florida. Florida housing starts continue to show aggressive growth at about 5%, right along with mortgage rates. So Mayor, I suppose that's something that you're seeing in your business as well. That interest rates are still below 5%, but they're slowly trending up. And as the market stabilizes, I think that will probably level out. You can see the curve is starting to flatten out just a little over 5%. Consumer Price Index, again, has been kind of really wild over the period from 2004 to 2018. Again, the variations are stabilizing right around that 2%. So I anticipate that that's a good number to consider. Florida personal income still remains strong, stabilizing out at about 5% for the forecast period. So that's pretty strong growth. Personal income increasing at 5%. Florida population continues to rise. Estimate between 16 and 17, there were 900 people a day moving to Florida. And based on that growth, it appears that that continues to be the trend. And I would think that Port Orange and the surrounding area will get their fair share of those people moving to Florida. This information was taken from the Daytona-Ormond Beach Metropolitan Statistical Area, bringing it closer to home. Personal income growth of 4.7%. Real per capita income of $36,500, average annual wage of $45,000, annual wage growth of 3.8%, and I think that seems to be what's happening in the marketplace. Now this is a long-term forecast. They went out to 47, so this is a long trend, so they see continued growth in the Florida market. Population growth of 1.3% and unemployment running right around 4%. And the statistics I've seen, 4 to 5% is considered full employment.
Right.
So if we get below full employment, we're having a pressure on wages. If we're at about 4 or 5%, then things kind of stabilize out. If it goes the other way, we start getting an inflationary market. In the areas of growth, we see construction, and I don't think we have a whole lot of mining in Florida, but construction certainly is a major driver of the economics. 6.5% growth over the forecast period. A little smaller growth in the professional and business services. It's interestingly enough, state and local government is a negative. And to me, that means that their government's going to do more for the more people. In general, they're not having the same growth that they had before. So with technology and better business practices, we're able to do more with less. The next slide is taken from Zillow. You may or may not like that particular index, but certainly it's an indication of prices. You can see from 2010, there was a significant drop, finally getting back up in 2019. Average home value, pardon me, average home value was about $225,000, and that last year of growth was 2.5%. So we're anticipating something like that in our area. Now, I'll mention later, but I might as well mention it now. Our preliminary forecast from the state appraiser is coming June 1st, so this Friday. So the numbers we're projecting now are really preliminary. We're estimating what that number should be, but we'll have a better number for you after June 1st. On this one, it's a tighter look at just the last year. So 4.2% last year and 2.5% this next coming year, which is going into 2020. So we can see a little slower rate of growth in the Port Orange area. So what does all that mean? The overall economy is U.S. economy is flat to slightly up. Florida has a better economy than the U.S. Interest and inflation are stable. Florida local housing growth is still positive with new residents and employment and continued low unemployment. So we feel that it's generally stable environment for the next few years. We don't see any wild changes going either up or down. So what has been the change in taxes for a typical Port Orange taxpayer over the last 5 years? This one, I want to thank Alan for his help on this. It's some work that he had done. But the green line is what a sample, this particular same property that he identified was $172,000 assessed and taxable value with the homestead exemption $122,000. So you can see on the left-hand side is 2015, 2678 was the total taxes, and that includes everything from Volusia County and the hospital and all the other taxing entities. And in 2019, it was 2576. During that same period of time, the total property tax, the ad valorem, the INS, or the debt service portion, and the drainage fees included in that blue number, 656 to 719. So a fairly steady but slow growth on the Port Orange component. Looking at the example of what I just mentioned, this is a detail of the blue numbers on this slide. So the total ad valorem for 2019 was 568.01 for this same property. The INS portion, or the debt service portion, was 3587, and the drainage fee was 115. If you can look down that slide, you can see at the bottom it was 504. We're now at 568 based on the millage changes that the council's approved. Interestingly enough, though, you can see that the interest or the INS portion went from 52 to 35 in the current year, and that's because the debt service is about just under $1 million a year, and the actual rise in the ad valorem, or the valuations of property, has been higher. So having that same debt service would need a lower component of millage to pay that debt service. Mm-hmm. So even though the ad valorem has been going up a little bit, the INS has been going down. And you can see the drainage went from 99 to 115 now.
Scott, what you know what the maturation date is on the 2006 INS, right offhand?
I don't know.
Approximately.
We can get you that answer in there.
Okay.
It seems to me that the amortization schedule I saw had a few more years in there, but I'll get you a roll-off on that.
Not that it's going to make any difference,
Okay.
but for a point of curiosity,
Yep.
I'd like to know.
Good question. Okay, now we're looking at the review of the top 10 general fund revenues. This first slide shows the current sales tax that we get from the state, along with state revenue sharing. You can see that the top line, the gold line, has a 6-year average of 6.1% growth. We're forecasting 2% for 2020. And the blue line, which is the state revenue sharing, was 6.9% average growth, and we're again forecasting 2%. So we're trying to be as conservative as we can until we get more information. The next slide shows the other taxes and fees. This includes the FP&L franchise fee, utility service tax for electric, utility service tax for water, and the communications service tax. All of those are generally sloping up with the exception of the communication tax. And I've seen this before. It's generally because more people are using cell phones for their primary landline, and that's not part of the communication tax. So that's why that's been declining every year. As far as internal transfers, payment in lieu of taxes are sometimes called the pilot fees. Those are payments that, excuse me, payments that other entities, governmental entities within Port Orange pay the general fund for property that's not taxable because this is a tax-exempt organization. So if they were a private entity, this is the amount of money they would have paid the government. So that number is the orange number. And the administrative service fees then is a allocation of administration, finance, HR, and what's the other one? There's one more. I've got it in my notes here. But the administrative departments of the general fund are billed out to the other departments within the city for administrative fees. So it says this, for us to do that work, they would have to do it themselves, so this is our allocation of expense to them.
Understood.
Okay, the uses of equity, the green line is one transfer to other funds. You can see the high number there is $22,412,000. The little detail on the right there shows that $230,000 of that went to fleet replacement fund, and the other $2.2 million was for the DLH annex, $800,000, landscape for $650,000, City Hall HVAC for $220,000, Causeway Dock refurbishment for $130,000, and all others at $382,000. You can see for the 19 budget, both the one-time purchases and the transfers were zero. If you're looking at our forecast for 2020, we're looking at one-time purchases at zero in this forecast. The $1.35 million is for purchase of land for $1.15 million and $200,000 for the phase 2 of ADA. And that's in that number, and we'll see that again in just a minute. So the history for taxable property value, ad valorem, and millage. On the chart on the left, you can see the taxable property value has gone up. We're looking at the ad valorem value with the 3% increase. Now that may be higher, we don't know, but when you think about the taxable value, remember that most of the homes in Port Orange have a $50,000 homestead exemption, so that significantly decreases the taxable value that we have. There was a number that we had, if we looked at the actual value that we anticipate, it was $57 million new, but if we added that in there, the increase would have been 21%. And we just didn't feel that that was realistic at this presentation to show you. If it comes back in, we'll all be very happy. But we wanted to take what we think is 3% overall, and there was 7.5% in new construction that we've added in this forecast. So that total there comes out to the number of 3.3 billion on taxable value and an ad valorem of 14.7 million. Remember also that ad valorem that when we forecast 95% of that per state law. And those numbers are still at the existing millage rate of 4.6288. As far as the millage rate, this is a chart of what it has been over the last few years. We have not done anything on calculating a millage rate for 2020 at this point. We just don't have enough information yet. So a preliminary FY20 revenues and expenses. A real pretty picture. There's where some of the money goes. Remember, this is very preliminary. Look at lines 1 through 4. Total original FY19 budget is $38,700,000, and that's what you approved for last year. Increase in our property tax, as I mentioned, we're looking at 3% of property values and a 7.2% increase at a growth rate of $4.6 million. And that's generating $527,000,000. If we're looking at the other items, remember those 6 other items that we had on those other 2 charts, that's additional $372,000. But out of that, we're showing a decrease in the communication service tax because that was a downward sloping line. And that's taking away $57,000. Here we have an appropriation of equity for the $1.15 million and also the $200,000. So that would be an initial projection of $4,858,718 for the FY20 preliminary budget for revenues in general fund.
I'm sorry, the 317, that 200,000, that's the continuation of the ADA?
That's correct, yes, Mayor. And the 1.15 million is the Dave's Pest Control, the option that the city has on that.
Can you refresh my memory of the ADA? What did we do this past budget?
Well, there was,
Did we break up
it was a total of
200,000?
400,000, so we spent 200 this year and then 200 in the next year to finish it up.
Thank
Yep. Okay, so that's the revenue side. Looking at the expense side, you can see we start at the the 2 numbers we had before, the 38,66550, and taking out of that 156,000 of capital that was in the general fund, because that's not an expense, it was use of capital. We annualized all of the increases that we had in excuse me, in 2019, any classification changes that happened in that period. And looking at all those, we had 352,000. We added a general employee pensions changes in there. Oop, this is not the right slide. I apologize for that.
That's an actual time.
That first number up here, if we're looking at, can't get that easily for you. Do you have 548 negative on the bottom of your page in your?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 48,150.
Yes, thank you. That's, I don't know if we didn't get this one updated. If you look at that number, we have 537,000 for annualizing all of the known personnel changes from last year to this year. And then included, that's all right.
No, keep going.
Oh.
They were too open. Maybe I just grabbed.
Line 17 represents the
Keep going.
difference.
Say again now?
I was going to say, it's all the entire difference comes from the expense on line 17.
Line 17, that's correct, Mayor.
Okay.
And included in that is all the pension rate changes, the fire, and the police, the FY20 negotiated, oh, there we go. Thank you.
Everything we've already approved.
Yes, so these have already been approved. Now then, we put in here council's guidance and, oops, council's guidance and the chief's plan to add 4 new officers in FY20, and those are in there. Total, everything, salary, benefits, equipment, and the vehicle at 510,000. And the new positions for finance, an accountant 2 for 6 months, and an accounting supervisor for 6 months. The reason those are in there for 6 months is the other half of that year is paid for through the ERP funding.
Gotcha. So those aren't wait half a year and hire anybody. Those just what the funding source is.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then, as
Let's
you
get
can see,
through these and then we'll go through them one by one individually.
right. So we're still in negotiations for the last 2 there, so we have not put a number in there. There will be, depending what the negotiations are, an addition to that in that forecast. Solar subscription fee, 56,000. Looking at the consultant for consolidating all of the pension plans into Florida Retirement System, 150,000. Update the city strategic plan, 60,000. And then the use of the money that we appropriated the revenue for above for the purchase of the property of 1.15 million, and the transfers to the 317 for the ADA transition plan, 200,000. So total preliminary expenses on this schedule with those assumptions is 41,403,000, leaving a shortfall of 548,150.
Okay.
Uh,
Once let's
You want? Sure.
let's stay there because I think that's the meat of our discussion
Okay.
today. Council, you want to go through that, or you and then go to CIP? Let's go to
I
the
would like
last.
to hit the CIP if you don't mind, Mayor, because that's may have a bearing on your discussion.
Okay.
Okay. So on the requests that have come in from the departments, this is a fairly extensive list, and the
Yeah.
city manager and I have gone through, and he's preliminarily ranked these in order. And so if you can see, we've tried to tie each one of these projects into the department and also a goal that the city council has. If you look at both pages, it's a total of about 4.5 million. And so based on what you, goals and objectives are for funding any or some of these projects, that may have a bearing on what you decide to do on the other page. So
Are
I'd
any
be
of
happy to go
these-
back.
Are any of these funded already?
These are all unfunded.
And are they expected to come out of a millage in a general fund or?
Not right now until the council approves. These are all unfunded.
If we say
Unfunded.
yes, then yes. If
Yeah,
we
then-
say
then it'd
no,
have to
or
be-
we wait to fund it in another year, because these are, all of these are general fund expenditures in this, from the CIP.
That's correct. Now, I would point out that the playground replacements, that should be 100 instead of, the total project's 200, but 100 of that is a match grant. So the expense there would be 100. And then on number 8, the rec center remodel, that is our portion of a match grant. The total project's 800,000.
That wasn't allocated earlier in any
No,
budget?
not yet. This is new.
It was
But we started
allocated
that
in the,
project.
is allocated in the CIP to this year, when we did this CIP last year.
Yeah.
So I'll be happy to go back to
Fun.
the expenses chart now.
Let's go, yeah, let's go, I think that one might be an easier road to hoe, and then we'll go through these one by one.
Okay?
When we flip, yeah, flip back to 34.
And Mayor, as you're going through these, just keep in mind there are some things here, I know that we all, a lot of times will focus on millage rate. Keep in mind that the items that are in here that use fund balance or savings to purchase them will not have an effect on millage rate either way.
Okay, and I understand that, but
Yeah.
what?
That doesn't mean you
here-
have to
here-
do
here-
it.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It drives me nuts, and this is just me, it drives me nuts when we say, we need to build our budget around this millage rate. We need to build a budget around what we feel we need. And once we have our needs assessed, what's it gonna cost? And if we're overburdening our taxpayers, then we need to make some hard decisions. The last thing I wanna do is say, yes, this millage rate is okay, and all of a sudden, what we've done is allow staff to come bring all the wants forward because we gave them a millage rate that's attractive. No, what we need to do is make tough, hard decisions about the items themselves and what they cost. And if we come up with a budget that we can't accept because we've overspent, then we need to come back and figure out what else we're gonna cut. I refused to punt that decision. It starts with us. If we're overspending, then we need to decide what services we don't want to pay for this year. If we feel like we need a certain service and we need to add it, then we need to live with the fact that, of what it's going to cost. But we need to make the decisions on the items, not on the dollars and cents that go along with it, and advocate that responsibility downward to somebody else. No, we need to make those decisions right here. That's up to us. Not that I have a strong opinion about it or anything, but in looking at that, the 4 new police officers in fiscal year 20 of $510,000. You guys can chime in and we'll decide what we want to do collectively, but for me, that was part of a 5-year plan that I think that we can pause for a year because we're a couple years into it. And I think we're getting very good results from that plan. I still think that we need to put more officers on the street, and I think we've done that the last couple of years. And I'm committed to continuing to do that long-term, but I'd like to look at maybe pausing that for a year and assessing what we've got.
Just a quick question on that. Do you have the information? Do you know that we have, excuse me?
You can leave it on, we're not captioning tonight,
Yeah.
you didn't.
Just a quick question in relation to that. Have we, the additional officers we added last year, have we filled those positions or any of them vacant? I know we funded them.
believe we have, but I don't know for sure.
I'm just
We can
curious
Get you
as-
that answer. Do you
Okay.
know, Alan?
I don't.
I
We can
do.
look at this.
And
Mayor
we,
does.
and we have The only, aside from normal turnover, which always happens.
Yeah.
Sure.
We have hired to fill those positions. We still have the normal turnover that we have. So even if you look at a top line and say that, oh, we're missing one or missing two, there's always a vacancy amount from normal turnover, but
Sure.
that's where we're at.
That's all.
Thanks, I asked that question earlier. Other thoughts on whether we fund 4 new police officers this year or not?
Well, the second safest city, so that's a good thing, with the staff that we have, apparently.
True.
So I don't know, doesn't sound like we need 4. I know we're growing.
Oh, we need every bit.
I don't know how many is the right answer, but, or if any. I guess I'd probably need some dialogue on why we need 4 and why can't we postpone it another year.
And we don't have to make that decision tonight, but honestly, I think that this is a single-year decision as part of a multi-year plan.
Right.
So what you're going into, Jack, we may go back and forth
Yeah.
on this as a council, whether we want to do 4, whether we want to do 1, whether we want to pause a year. I don't know. I personally, I'm committed to expanding to the 5-year plan, but I'd like to pause a year. And I'll be honest, part of my incentive to that is that there are 2 people that had a very large impact on our ad valorem the last couple of years. That's Matthew and Irma. We experienced $11 million in expenditures from 2 hurricanes, had a huge impact on what we had to do. And I'd really like to, if we can, have a year in which philosophically that we can play it as close to the vest as much as possible before we look at doing any more. Thoughts, gentlemen?
As far as my thought on the 4 police officers, I go back to the first page, the strategic goals. Goal 1, public safety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And this is my take on it. We're not gonna, we've moved up, I think we were 11th safest, 7th safest, and now the 2nd safest city in Florida. We're the 1st safest city with a population of over 50,000. The city that got ahead of us had a population of, what, 17 or 19,000 residents. And currently, I believe if Chief was here, he could confirm this, we're still in the bottom 2% in manpower per capita in the state of Florida.
So we're efficient?
They're overworked. Efficiency is one thing, but they do a lot. They're doing a lot. I'm not looking, myself, this is just me, I'm not looking to do anything that would negatively impact our number 1 goal, public safety, and I think delaying adding officers when they're needed is gonna negatively impact that.
Do we need them now?
I would say yes.
And this is just for conversation. I don't
Yeah.
want to make this decision tonight because
Yeah.
we don't even have the chief in the room to ask him the
Yeah.
questions, but
But I would say it is
I just-
definitely needed.
I'm just saying, this is one of
Yeah.
the biggest budget items out here where
Oh,
we
yeah.
can make an impact.
Yeah, and I get that, and we're gonna have to make that.
Or maybe we were doing some horse trading and hit a happy medium, but my thought is that this is impactful immediately right now, after what we've had to do the last couple of years, mostly because of hurricanes, that maybe this is the year that, with all the things that we've done, we take a pause from adding anything new, assess what we've got, see if it's appropriate, and then move forward. But that's a thought.
We might be able to look in other areas, but page 1, goal 1, public safety. That's what it's all about.
Okay. Well, I think I know how Drew feels. Scott, how do you feel?
I think that with this particular line, it's a pretty complex line to have a discussion at. And I think that you're gonna have to have the chief of police and Jake, no disrespect, Alan, But, you know, when we start talking about things about what's our goal and what our crime rates are, keep in mind that the whole second safest city has to do with violent crime rates.
Correct.
And we've always been extremely high and done very, very well in that category. That statistic alone is not going to be made or broken on how many police officers you have just in and of itself. There are a lot of variables that go into that. The community, you know, when you look at the other issues that we make throughout the entire budget, the type of community that attracts good quality residents and good quality businesses to want to invest and be here, and folks who are going to be active in the community and play a very beneficial role in, you know, protecting their investment and doing all the right things and being part of solutions as a part of problems. You know, all those different types of variables will play a role into that, though. So I don't think we should. I mean, that's an awesome honor. Don't get me wrong. It is something we should be very, very, very proud of. But we've got property crimes that are going up. We're having lots of issues with your petty thefts and your car breaks and things like that, and those are real problems, and they aggravate the community a lot. The community talks about them a lot. Traffic issues are big issues. You know, you can only respond to traffic issues in so many ways if you don't have the resources and those things to do that. So, you know, I would just caution that when we look at that, and I'm not saying that we need those right now or don't. I'm just saying that I think it's a broader discussion, and then we need to know what all those different variables and impacts could be. I will tell you my big thing, which is I think I've been pretty consistent on the entire time I've been on the dais. I don't want to fund positions we can't fill and sustain. Until we can show that we are filling them all and sustaining them all, I don't believe in just putting more money in the budget for the sake of, well, we should, you know, we could say, well, we should have 130 police officers. Yeah, but if
And I think that's where we
I
were
can't
3 years
get-
ago.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and so we started trying to fix that, and quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure where we stand today. How many vacancies do we have? What has the sustainability been, you know, the last, you know, 12 to 18 months on retention of what we're having? I mean, if we're still kind of, you know, if we've reached a level, but we're still kind of processing the comings and the goings, because the reality of it is especially for this particular skill set, you know, you can hire a police officer tomorrow. That police officer's not on the street doing that job for 6 months.
Right.
Or longer if we got to put them through the academy. So I just think that we need to probably get a little bit better understanding of how, you know, where are we at for the last 12 months? Have we filled all the vacancies? Are we sustaining those positions, or are we still seeing a pattern of turnover that can be expected into next year? Because we had 4 positions, but we're still turning them over. We're not really seeing full-time, ready to go police officers out on the street. Then I'm not so sure that we're there yet. So I don't know. that I
Sounds
know
like
that
to me
yet.
we're going to have a vibrant discussion at our next budget workshop on the item.
Perhaps.
Okay. Chase?
Oh, man, this is always my favorite time of the year. It really is, you know, for a number of reasons. You know, staff always brings quality requests up here every single time. And, you know, I always appreciate the dialogues that we have up here. You know, we all have, we come with different ideas, different requests, different philosophies to it. You know, I see it similar to you, Mayor, a little differently. I prefer to look at the, and I don't think we disagree with this. You know, my first question is not what we need. My first question is what do we have to spend? And then after that, what do we need based on our commitments already? You know, I mean, I can go list by list, but I think all my responses are going to be the same. I'm going to prefer to see, number one, what does the rollback rate look like, then to include all new growth revenue that we have in. And when that comes in, then I look at that and I say, okay, this is what I have to spend. What can we spend it on?
So then
After
you go
that-
to the candy store?
After that, I go to what is our commitments, you know, with our contracts and whatnot. And I would not renege on any of those.
can't.
That's first and foremost. And if we need more to do that, that's where I'm willing to go.
Okay. Well,
So
just
looking
keep-
at our
Just keep in mind, if you're gonna take that approach, and you come in, and rollback is this, and that's what you decide you want to be at.
No, no, I never said I would want, I
Okay.
wanted, yeah, no, no, I know what you're saying.
I'm just saying, you've got to be prepared to cut some services,
Yeah, no, what
if you're gonna take that approach.
I'm not suggesting going to rollback, I never do. What I wanna see though, I think it's our due diligence. I wanna see what it looks like with our current revenue, what we have. This is what we have to spend, and then I wanna see the growth coming in. I think every budget ought to operate that way. I have to do that in my household, and every business has to operate that way. I wanna take the same approach. And then if we don't have enough to accommodate the commitments that we've made, and the contracts that we are currently negotiating, then I'm willing to ask for more. I do want to take care of our employees. That to me, that's first and foremost. I want to do well on our negotiations, and I want to honor our contracts. After that, I'm not looking to add more services. So,
Okay. Jack?
No, you had mentioned something earlier, Scott, that there was a 3% calculation, but you thought it could be as much as 21% with the growth. What was that? How much?
That's the 6-year moving average that we have.
Right.
If we included that, I felt it was such an outlier without more data that we
Mhm.
just took not the total, but the last 5 years. And that was the 3% that we came up with.
I mean, it could be substantially more than 3%.
It could. Be very cautious on
Right.
putting any number on it.
Right.
We'll see when we get there,
That's the whole thing.
but this is a starting point.
Yeah. I think, you look at this, we're not that far off of budget right now, from what I see. And there are some things that probably could be impacted. You mentioned one. I guess as far as the police go, my question there would be, do we have overtime that we're paying? We were here for a celebration the other night with recognizing officers. They're some of the finest gentlemen you'll ever want to protect you. I mean, there's some really fine officers we have at Port Orchard, no question about it. And if they're working a lot of overtime and they're missing time from their families and so forth, and we need to add staff to cut back overtime, I think that'll pay for itself. By eliminating overtime and maybe adding an officer. Some of the other items, fleet financing, I mean, I don't know what our rotation is on our vehicles and different things like that, so, we really need to take a close look at that. I'm not really in favor of raising taxes, particularly given the fact that we just did a stormwater increase recently to some of the, residents. We're talking about a fire fee now. When you start adding all these things in and then you look at an increase in taxes, it all adds up. It's money.
Absolutely.
And to the person that's getting by on Social Security, there's a lot of them out there, it's a real challenge. And I want to make sure that we don't negatively impact those people when we look at taxes and so forth. Now, granted, some of them live in nice homes, but they're getting very little income because there is that $50,000 homestead exemption. But nevertheless, they do have limited income. So I want to be cautious about any increase in taxes, and I want to be cautious about, if not getting it from millage, getting it from other places. So, I always look at it collectively because at the end of the day, a bill is a bill, whether you're paying it with your tax bill or whether you're paying it in a separate fee. So. I'd like to see the real revenue number, but I think we're close to where we need to be here. And then again, you think about last year's budget versus where we are today. I don't know, what kind of surplus we have left over from last year. There's some monies left over, and I don't believe in obviously spending that money because this year we could be higher than budget and we'd need those funds. But at the same time, I think when you look at personnel and different things, there's employees that need increases, but at the same time, we've got a staffing fulfillment of about 88–89%. So even though we say we want to hire 100%, we only have about 90% of the people that are actually working because there's always vacancies and turnover.
It's about 40 vacancies,
About 40. So
so it's pretty close to 10%.
right, close to 10%. So when you look at that, there's opportunities there to look at doing some things. So I'm not sure a tax increase is necessary, but certainly we need all the numbers, I guess, to make that decision.
I think philosophically, we've got to decide as a body what we want to be. And knowing that the variables in this budget, adding police officers, do we want to do have a consulting, do we want to talk about the plan to, the study to move to FRS and what it would take and how it would impact our pensions, our pension costs? You've got the update to the city strategic plan. Do we want to spend those things this year? And I think those are the things that basically, those are the three biggies right there that we need to keep in mind moving forward as we get input from city staff. I think those are the things that we need to start asking questions of staff and the city manager now, so we can do our homework, so when it comes time to make the decisions on those things, we'll be ready.
Mayor, I'll tell you, I'd really like to know, I'd like to gauge what the feel is for our various employees and our union reps, what their, the seriousness of their consideration to moving to FRS before we would fund that, because I would be certainly interested in, because that's something that I've been strongly looking for a long time.
The last time we looked at
I just don't
it-
want to fund it if they're not
Well-
interested.
Well, it's not up to them. It's up to us as a policy. It's up to
Well,
us. If we can provide them what we promised them, I don't think that it really matters if it says Joe's Candy Store on it, as long as we're providing them
Does it
what we
give it a-
promised.
Well,
But what's efficient is what the question is.
Actually, unless there's been some dramatic changes, the last time this came up, 2008 through 2012, when they were talking about it, to convert over, it's an individual choice of the employee, not a group. So if they're in a
Right.
defined benefit now, they can stay in that plan. You can't force them to go anywhere. I mean, I really think the only viable option on that, because you're looking at, and FRS then, and I think now, they won't accept any unfunded liability, so it has to be fully funded, so.
Yeah, we'd have to float a
i-
serious
i-
bond.
If
right
the
now.
entire, group wanted to go to FRS, you'd have to fully fund that cost
Right.
up front.
Yeah.
You could look at possibly going from this point forward, new hires would go into FRS. And I think that, Alan could probably shed some light on this. I think that's a way you can, you still have to operate the other plans, and if I'm not mistaken, I think you can still have the state funding for that, but then you'd have the expense of the new hires going to FRS and making that, whatever that percentage contribution is that the city's required to make, you have to make that on top of.
There may be a large
on
upfront
top
cost.
of all the other pension plans that you still have to fund. So, while it's nice to look at that, the bottom line is that if people say, I'm comfortable and I want to stay where I'm at, the only option is to do it for new hires.
One of the things I think with the FRS, I think it gives you an opportunity. Employees will come there because of that. Where
Because of
before,
portability.
so, as
Perhaps,
a
yeah.
portability, so,
Yeah.
when you're looking at it from that standpoint, I think some of these vacancies that you're having trouble filling right now might be a little easier to fill.
Well, and I also kind of look at it, yes, it's an upfront investment. The last time we looked at it, the economy was entirely different. But if we're contributing 85 to 90% of salary to pensions now, and all of a sudden we're dropping that to 25, 30%, that's a lot of money. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that goes along with that. So I think that is certainly going to be a vibrant discussion as well.
I think that's one of the ones, Alan, you can chime in, but, that's, when you're not chiming in, man.
He doesn't have a PowerPoint.
Here's the thing, we've kicked this discussion around for a long time, and we've got some very intelligent folks on city staff. And now we've got Scott as well. So,
Thank you for that.
you
That's
know,
been included in that call.
I think, yeah,
I hope that's what that is.
right? As we've looked at this from the 30,000-foot view before, it's always been that your upfront cost is is huge,
Like
okay?
a million.
So, you know, the more your pension plan is unfunded, the more you better have to be able to go get that somewhere. So, you know, while our plans have improved steadily, a little bit at a time, we're kind of heading in the right direction. I don't know if we're there yet really to take this on. So what I would ask on this particular line is for Jake and Alan and Scott, get together and let us know, based on your experience and your knowledge that you have, is this really the time for us to take the risk to spend $150,000 to truly analyze this? And what do we, at least on that 30,000 foot view, what do we see? I'll tell you, Jack, the portability thing for FRS can hurt you really bad as well. There's two edges on that sword, trust me, because you can, in a department, in a city where you have departments that don't have a lot of fat and you've only got that limited level of personnel, and you create a portability factor like that, they can be gone quick, and it takes a long time to recover. You look at your police force, and it takes 6 months to put somebody on the street. That means if they're certified today. So when I'm just saying, approach that with a lot of caution.
It goes both ways.
It does, and I think it can hurt us
Thus the
more.
debate.
Yeah, we could lose them
Yeah,
as easily
so,
as we could.
and I'm not saying it's not something we should look at. I'm just trying to make sure everybody on the dais is fully aware of different possibilities and things. So anyway, that would be my thing on that particular line. I really think that without too much trouble in that, I think that we've got enough internal staff to come back on that line specifically and say, hey, we really think that this is worth spending the $150,000, and that we can see some promise on that, or yeah, let's kick this one a little farther and work on just improving the the funding status of the plans we have now. So
Yes, as council's mayor, if it's okay.
please.
As council has
You were already
indicated.
invited by Scott to
Yeah.
chime in, so.
Just making sure. As council's indicated, this is a very complex issue with a lot of moving parts. You've seen analysis from us before on this. It changes all the time. Every year we get a new analysis from our pension plans about what the unfunded liability is. Your payback is going to change. That calculation is going to change. There were some very good salient points made. One of them is that you do still get the premium tax revenues as long as you're not 100% funded. You don't have to pay off your liability at all when you switch over. No liability from that individual person going over can go into FRS plan, but the liability that you hold for the remaining people in the plan that are here, you don't have to pay off. Depending on the analysis, it could benefit you to do a pension obligation bond and pay some of it off. It does not benefit you to pay it all off, because then you won't get the premium tax revenues. Even if it's 99% funded, you still get that revenue coming in. It's not a decrease in the amount. You still get the entire amount.
Is that different information from what we thought of before? Because I heard that we had to pay it all off to.
No, if everybody who's fully vested went in, then if they all said, yeah, we want to go, it would be a huge expense.
Eventually, you still have to pay it off. You could pay it off right now. You still have to pay those obligations, whatever they are. You don't have to pay the whole thing off right now. But there were a lot. We've gone through this a couple of times. There've been a lot of questions. Those were some of the questions that we had looked at.
Right.
So, but yeah, we could definitely take a look at maybe some of the different groups. The way FRS looks at it, we've got a couple of bargaining units. We've got at will. We've got civil service. FRS looks at it slightly different. They have basically 3 different groups, and everybody from those groups would kind of have to go in or not go in, or the new election, do all new people go in? Do some people who are here want to stay and to go? There are different ways to do it. I agree that that's the best way to do it, is to give them the opportunity, the choice. Do you guys want to do it or not, guys and gals? So we can look at those 3 different groups and kind of do a back of the napkin calculation as we have in the past to see maybe which one of those might be your best bet moving forward, at least to maybe put our toe in the water and try it out.
The one other element to that would be that we've already got some issues where we've got employees that are in different plans based on longevity. They've been here, and those are already creating some issues amongst those different levels. And for us during negotiations and things like that, we create another element to that. You're going to get
There is a cost to administer.
Yeah, you're going to have that issue as well through the course of negotiations when you're trying to figure out how to compare with other municipalities within the region. That's just going to be another element. So just kind of, and now that's an HR issue as well. So
Yeah.
just kind of.
And the other thing with that is the people that move over to FRS, it's not bargaining, it's not bargained anymore. It's off the table, you don't have to administer it.
Right.
You lose all those costs.
But the
Um,
benefits aren't exactly the same as what I'm saying, and so again, you're gonna have another element where you've got, let's just say you've got your police department, for example, and you're gonna have,
Tier 1, Tier
folks,
2,
yeah,
FRS.
Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and FRS.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're trying to, do an apples to apples, type of deal when you're negotiating. Certain benefits are more important to certain folks at certain times in their careers.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you've got different values in the different pension systems. So I'm just saying that it's gonna add some more complexity that needs to be at least considered on the front end as well. Because everything will be a cost.
Okay. So looking forward to, let's give those, let's start asking the questions we need to ask as we move forward. Scott, on the 317 fund,
Yep.
are those 21 items already factored in or not?
These are all unfunded, Mayor.
Okay. That's,
And what I would ask, and I've done this before, is for each of you to rank, you can maybe pick your top 5 or try to go through all of them. So if I can consolidate them and say, here's the rankings for each one, so that may help you on our next discussion. If there are some additional funds, how you would like to fund these, if any or at all.
and I think
That would help because.
we've
this
got a
would-
lot of questions to ask about some of these as well before we
We'd be
can
happy
even
to
do
answer
that.
those as well. But that would at least help us know if I think it was Councilman Tremont said that, yeah, whatever monies we have, then we can determine what we want to fund. If we have that ranking collectively for the council, that would help
We
the
might
discussion.
find that we have 1 through 7 and number 15 to do because of that
could be
little
as
bit of
well,
change that's
'cause number
left.
15 could come number 8, or
Yeah.
however you want to do it.
And does the number on the right-hand side represent that if we wanted to fund that item, that is the full
That's correct.
funding cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, these were the city manager's preliminary rankings, but you may have a totally different feel, and that would be helpful for us to know.
I can agree with number 1. He's absolutely right there, but there's so many things on this list that we haven't even talked about yet, so I'm not even close to being able to say that.
Mayor, on number 1, city managers proposed that there be a budget resolution on the 18th brought to you for the funding of this, so it would be in this year to take that out of equity, because we
Funding
know
which
it is
one?
a significant
one.
item.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, it died. We can't wait any longer.
That just
We're
floors me
there?
that building's just not that big. It just floors me that that's a $400,000
Yeah,
HVAC system. That just blows me away. It's not that big.
How is that possible?
I don't
$400,000?
understand that.
I was looking at that too. I was
We're not
like, I
rebuilding the
can't
building,
believe
we're
that's
just
400,000.
replacing the air conditioning system.
I know there's
I
more
think
to
that-
it than just the unit
Susan-
itself. If,
Susan, do you want to comment?
if you want more information,
Yeah,
Susan is here for that one.
Is this one of those deals where it costs us as much in design as it does for the actual air conditioning units?
The good news is, Susan Laval, Parks and Recreation Director,
Get it
the
off.
good news is it's already designed. We designed this a few years ago and had put it in the capital, and then it wasn't approved. So the good news, it's designed. So that cost is not included in that. So basically what has happened is when that building first opened, and many of you probably remember, when the air conditioner would come on, it sounded like a jet engine. So there was changes made to the existing units to basically turn off a unit and try and put the ductwork together. So what happened when that happened is it drew in still enough fresh air. And again, I'm not an engineer, an architect, I'm trying to explain this how it explained to me. It drew in more fresh air than actually it could put out. So it kind of rained up there in the ceiling. And then you saw all the tiles start to mold, right? And we had to go in and replace them all and try and repair some of the ceiling. This design is basically taking out those units, and where the units are located are in the ceiling. So they have to be dismantled, retaken out, all new ductwork needs to go back in, and then the new units put into the building.
And they're not.
It would almost be
ceiling.
easier, I think, just for someone who, again, I don't know much about how this is done. It must be easier to take the roof off, I think, and take the units out than the way they have to do it. But the way it's designed is they're just not in a good place. So that's the engineer's estimate. We don't know what we're going to get until
We
we
haven't
get
gone
it
out
out,
to bid
until
yet,
we go
so-
out to bid. So, could there be some changes and adjustments? Maybe. could there be some ideas from those manufacturers? We get that a lot, that come in and say,
Good
hey, I can
old-fashioned
get the
value
same
engineering.
result. Yeah, I can get the same result for cheaper. We might be able to get that.
Where'd we
But
get the 414 number?
The
Engineer.
engineering
the
study.
engineer
Okay.
estimate, yeah. So,
The redesign hasn't been done by the same one who did the faulty initial design, right?
no, sir.
Okay.
Give it
Please
up,
say
that's
no.
a good question.
Yep.
So-
How many square, just for sake of, what's the about square footage for that building?
4,000?
I'd be guessing, but I want to say the whole building's around
Yeah,
maybe
that's-
5,000.
That's what I was thinking.
There's only 1,800 square feet inside. So,
I just cannot imagine. That just blows me away.
you should have seen my face when I got the
Yeah.
engineer's estimate. About fell out of my chair.
When I first, I mentioned this to Jake the other day when I saw that number.
You
I'm like,
couldn't wait to come to us.
there's no way. Are we like
With a straight
redoing the
face.
building also, or you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah, and we
kind
are
of-
seeing significant increases in HVAC work.
sure.
I'm sure you've heard it up here before from probably Lynn, but significant increases in the replacement of HVACs in our buildings.
Okay.
So.
What size units are those, Susan? Because I mean.
They're window units, Jack. You get them
For
There
each
are
other.
now
Take
window
together.
units there
Maybe
that
some
we're
mini
trying to air
splits,
condition the building.
mini
with.
splits.
They're portable and you put the tube out the
I
window.
wanna
and
say
it
they're-
forces it.
I want to say they're 220-ton units.
220-ton?
Hmm.
That's a lot for that building, or 1,800 square
Oh,
feet.
it blows the doors open
Yeah.
when that works. Yeah.
Thus the
Again,
good engine sound.
again, there's
But it also makes it rain inside.
it makes it rain inside.
That's
Yeah.
not good. So the doors are, more humidity's coming in and,
On a separate note, we just used that building actually for a graduation party for my daughter. Your staff was top notch as always.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank
And we
you.
didn't ask for a fee reduction of any kind, so.
Well, I'm glad to
future
hear that
people
also.
know
Normal
that-
thing when you grant, you wouldn't provide it.
I'm saying, future people who ask, I don't, you
Right.
know. But your staff always does a great job, Susan. Way to go.
You know, one thing we mentioned before, at one of the previous meetings when we were going over pension plans, was the administrative cost. Remember that? There's still 3 different plans with 3 different administrators. I think we really could create some efficiencies if we could bring those in-house and bring them to one. I don't know what it would take to do that, but we're talking at least $90,000 to $120,000. I don't know if those pension plans boards would be receptive to that idea, but I mean, the hours put in, we could do for probably $30,000 or $40,000 in house, and then you'd have the rest of that money or another part-time person to do something else. So I just think there's, I look at every little avenue, and that's just one avenue that I've noticed in a short period of time. But I think it's something we should probably pursue in that and things like that. So that would be my suggestion.
The plans have to agree to allow that.
Well, the board.
Yeah.
The board has to agree. And I think, you know,
Anything that cuts costs and makes the plans more viable, I would think that they would at least consider.
the city's
But I
paying
don't-
that, not the plan,
understand
so it would make sense.
The boards would have to.
Yeah.
Mayor, I welcome, of course, all discussion tonight, but to also frame, you know, obviously this is preliminary, very preliminary, as Dr. Niels has said. And I've heard this statement actually here tonight, which is good. And I think what Jake is looking for, just to frame the rest of the conversation this evening, is kind of an overall direction for staff moving forward for this budget process. Kind of, you know, there's really two ways to look at it, which I think Councilman Tremont had indicated, and so would you, Mayor, as well. And of course, there's different ideas on the council to this, but you know, for us to know to focus our work on what we need to do, especially since you know we're strapped with time with ERP and other projects going on, we need to know, I guess, what do you want us to come back with, you know, what we need, or do you want to know what we can afford? So it's really two ways about it. Do you want from the city manager, the CEO, to say, here's based on, you know, what I know about, you know, what's going on in the council and what I know is going on in the operations, here's what I think we need to continue the operations in the next year? Or would you rather have, you know, staff tell us what we can afford, and then we'll go from there? There's two different philosophies that was discussed this evening. If we kind of, when you wrap up the discussion tonight, kind of focus back on that, we'll know a little bit better how to proceed for the next round.
I think from, for my part, I'm looking for a budget that's pretty close to the vest this year. We've had to push it way past the red line the last 2 years because of hurricanes and other reasons, and I think that we need, me personally, I'm looking to give a taxpayer a little bit of a breath this year. And we need to keep it as close to the vest as possible. And that doesn't mean saying no to our priorities, it's just reallocating the timeline. I don't know, that's me. Chase, your thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, you know, my position was pretty clear. I want to know, what do we have to spend? What can we afford? And then, of course, on top of that, our prior commitments, that, you know, what we have to do.
Okay, Jack?
No, I mean, I think there's a absolute need. What are those items that we have to do? We don't have a choice. And then, you know, what's the next things as far as a wish list? And if there's any surplus money, we pick off that wish list, you know, by prioritizing based on what the council feels. That'd be my thought. Long years, me.
Yeah. Well,
Drew?
I appreciate the work that went into the Scott, but it is using the current millage rate, correct?
That's correct.
So right now, without the line 20 and 21, which are the, 21 and 22, which are the increases that we don't know what they will be yet, we're, at the current millage rate, we're at 550K deficit. So depending on what that number is, I mean, that could become $1 million. It just depends on where we're at. So when you say, do you want us to tell you what we can afford? Are you talking at 4.62? Are you talking at rollback? Or what?
Rollback
Because
is-
there's got to be there's got to be somewhere, like if you say what can we afford, if we know what it would produce at rollback. So what are your thoughts?
So I think in prior years, you know, we've kind of come at this one way and then ended up flip-flopping and going another way in terms of how we approach it.
And it was extremely troubling for me to do that.
So, and it is for staff. It's a lot of work to go back and forth and back and forth. When I used to be a budget analyst, we renamed our position Super Awesome Spreadsheet Reformatters because we'd have something different
Yeah.
to do every day. And so I think what Jake is really looking for is, you know, tell us kind of now, do you want to just budget to a millage rate and just give us kind of a range and we'll budget to that and tell you what we've got to cut or what we can add for that millage rate? If that's where we're going to end off, might as well just start there. If otherwise, you know, do you want to know what the actual needs are, and then we'll kind of fall into that millage rate based on what the revenue sources come in at over the next couple of days.
When we do that, whatever it is that we do, I need to see this list of things, either we're funding it or we're not funding it at that level. Because if we go back and I say, okay, that's what but we still need to do this, or, you know, maybe we can live without that and we can substitute this for it or whatever. As long as we're able to set the priorities of what it is we do or not do,
Yeah.
I will not abdicate that responsibility to somebody else. That's us. That's on us.
We usually get there.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Niels, that this also does not include any requests from the departments for any operating
That's correct.
and changes.
Absolutely not. There'll be none of those. Very good. Well done. Way to keep that under control this
Okay, so
year.
we got to give them.
They're there, they're just not here.
Drew, other comments?
No, I
They're
just
not
wanted
the
to be
numbers.
clear that
No
this
increase.
current one where we're 550K in the hole is based on the current millage rate.
Right. Scott?
No, I think we should continue to make it as complex for staff and city managers. It's worked great year after year after year, so I could think, no. You know, we could sit here all night and talk about theories and what's the best way to approach it and how to approach it, and the good news is that we get through it every single year, and this will be no different. You know, it's a balancing act because, you know, earlier tonight we're talking about, you know, quality of life and all the different things, and, you know, is it ever going to be to where we just say, okay, this is it, this is as good as the city's ever going to be, right? We're just going to stay right here. Or are we always going to be looking to say we need to understand that you always have to continue to invest in your city, and that means a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. You know, we've got, Mayor was talking about the other night, we've got about 1,000 properties, and that number seems to be going up, who, because in certain areas of the cities where we haven't invested and we haven't redeveloped and we haven't done those things, they don't pay any property taxes at all into this equation. And the fear is that we don't want that to continue to grow, because now that you know, that hardship gets spread out to a smaller group of people eventually. So, you know, there's a balancing act here, and it's about, you know, how do we continue to reinvest in the community, because we're all investors. That's one of the things the former Mayor Green used to always say: we don't have taxpayers, we have investors. I love that concept. I love that mindset, because I think that's exactly what we have. But we want to be prudent, we want to be cautious, we want to be conservative, but yet we also want to continually be reaching out there and feeling the pulse of the community. What's important to them? What are they looking for this year, that year, you know? So far this year, it's been interesting, because we just watched an event occur where we're watching the pulse in real time, you know, and things where we thought, you know, man, infrastructure and roads and lots of things like that are critically important. Maybe they're not as important as we thought they were, you know? So I don't know.
At least
you know,
not to us.
Yeah. And so I don't have a direct answer for you, and maybe it's a mix of both. You know, maybe it's a hybrid, which I think is what we typically find every year, is we end up with a little bit of a hybrid, and every single year it's a learning experience for this council and staff. And man, I wish we could make it easier on staff. I'd love to do it, and because I know that the amount of time and energy and effort. The only thing I would just say is rest on the fact that it seems like every single year we continue to make Port Orange a little bit better step, and we're always headed in the right direction. And so I know we'll continue to do that this year. Man, you know what? I hope, I would love nothing more than to be able to have excellent services, continue to bring more services and assets to the residents, and cut taxes. So if you want to bring me something, show me how to do that, right? I mean, that's what I want to see. But you know, and I get all the different
All day
challenges.
long.
That's right, no doubt. So that's what I want, right? That's what I think we all want. But I also understand reality and numbers and things like that. And it's a little bit early, and it's challenging right now, because we don't know what all those things really are. And you know, every year, one of the things I seem to, maybe I'm hearing it because I'm saying it to myself, but every year you look at quality growth, and I feel like the last 4 or 5 years we've seen a lot of quality growth. And every year I hear, but we're not gonna realize the impact and benefit of that for another year. Well, that year comes and goes, and I'm not sure that I really see that again, and I'm waiting. So I am waiting to see the benefits of a lot of the quality growth that we've had, but I also understand that even with quality growth, you get more demands. So
Reinvestment.
I'll stop at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, the only
Clear as mud.
question I have is, what is our time frame for workshops moving forward,
I
approximately?
think there's one CIP, the 20-something of June is the next one that's scheduled.
25th.
24th,
Good.
25th.
So we're gonna tackle, the CIP budget in about a month, and then early July,
Mhm.
we're gonna be digging into this. Okay?
We have scheduled meetings with the departments over the next couple weeks, and then we'll be meeting with the departments and the city manager the end of June. So-
Well, as long as you remember the word no and say it with empathy,
That's the tough part.
Well, you know, that CIP budget is going to be interesting, because I think for a long time on a lot of those issues, we've all been thinking, okay, these are the things that the community's looking for, and these are the things they're going to want, and we may be reevaluating some of those things this year in that CIP budget.
it's not just once.
Yeah,
It's not just once.
right,
Goal
right,
number 2 is infrastructure.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
yeah.
With that, I've got 2 reminders for everybody.
Quick question first, if I could. Scheduling thing, we talked about, early July. Do we have anything that first week of July?
We normally don't meet the first week of July.
All right, good, that's it.
Alan?
I just want to clear up the mud a little bit, make sure I know what we're going to do next time. So I'm trying to think of like a little bit of a hybrid approach where we can maybe, it kind of sounds like I'd like to, if I can, we, the collective, would like to see what we can do to keep the millage rate low. Obviously, that's always a plus. but at the same time, what does that mean, for what community we want to be? So maybe providing a couple of millage rates that stay within a certain range.
Did you use the word rollback anywhere in that conversation?
I didn't use rollback or increase or either
You
one.
should.
Well, if that's
Between-
what you want to see.
That, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah, 'cause we-
that's a baseline. What are we getting for our baseline?
Okay, so low
What are we
end.
getting for our
And then
baseline and what are our
add
other?
the other, but not, I mean, not even up to the current millage rate, but nothing higher, no, impossibility.
I certainly don't want to see anything beyond what we do now.
Yeah, so,
So consensus, look at rollback. What does that mean in terms of what we do now?
With
Yeah.
increase-
And then
with
with the new revenues, with the
Yeah.
growth that's coming in, because you'll get some money there.
And any surplus that we may have.
Yeah.
well, that's
That'll be,
always part of
you
it.
could use that for one-time things.
Right.
And then
Right,
maybe
we got three on there
maybe
now.
have a millage rate in between and kind of give you, here's what fits in that, under that line, here's what fits over that line. And then from the city manager's perspective of, based on what we know about what your priorities are, we've ranked everything that we can fund and that we can't fund with these couple of millage
Okay.
rates, and then we can go from there.
And then we would.
And then
say,
you can
well,
decide.
Fund this and don't fund that.
Right, you'll see what that looks like. And
Okay.
then, just to also reiterate, keep in mind, I know I kind of said this in the microphone, but, we just want to make sure I put it out loud. As we do every year, we ask departments what they feel they need. We hire the department directors to say, what are you going to need to continue the services going forward? What are you going to need to increase, decrease? What does that look like? Those operating requests are not reflected in these numbers at all. So they're not even in there. The capital requests are in there, but none of them are funded. 0 of them are funded. So you've seen what those are. The other thing that's not currently funded, because we just don't have a number at this point, are any changes to the NAGE contract, correct? And civil service and at-will employees. So, yeah, and you're already at a $500,000 deficit with that. Now, there are some things in that list that we all talked about tonight that we can then take some of your comments and maybe we massage that a little bit. And we'll come back and show you kind of what those 3 millage rates look like. The other thing I'd throw out there, since you're all here tonight, is one of the things is really for you, which is a strategic plan update. So we did a strategic plan right before, well, you weren't here either, and you won't be here either.
You're right. Later.
But you
June
will,
4th, you're right.
but you will have 2 new council members.
Substitute teacher.
One
needs
kind
some
of,
respect.
one kind of new, who was not here when we did it. It is through 2021 or 22. So we do have $60,000 in the budget for that. That's one of the things that we can take a look at if you want to hold off and wait till the next year, since you only have 2 new members, or talk to them about whether or not
And that-
when they get on board.
We can talk about that moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in my thoughts in my head is next year's election year,
Mhm.
and we may see some faces change, and I think it'd probably behoove us to wait a year.
Mhm.
But let's see
That's
how
another
this
thing you're
plays
talking about.
out, and then we'll have that conversation later.
Yep.
We don't need to digress.
I think I've got a good way forward to give you some information for next time.
Okay? With that, I have
Very
2
good job.
reminders.
Thank you.
One, we meet next week,
Yes.
June 4th, our first meeting of June,
Has there been an agenda put out yet?
at 6:30.
Thank you.
That will be our first meeting
Still
of
preliminary
June.
this time?
That will be Jack's last meeting with us.
Yes, it will.
So I look
Okay.
look
You did.
forward to sending him off with a full agenda with a lot to do.
Okay.
Second reminder,
Mhm.
2 weeks from today. I've said this before. Put the reminder in your phones, your calendars, whatever it is you got to do now. 2 weeks from today is election day in the city of Port Orange.
Yep.
One ballot. The person who's going to sit where Jack is sitting is going to get selected that night. I do not want to see a small sample size at the polls. This is Port Orange. We show up, we vote. So I'm going to challenge you all right now. Put in your phones. Remember, it's a very simple thing to do. If you get a mail ballot, you can do you can go ahead and send it back now. But because it's a very simple election, there shouldn't be long lines. It shouldn't be difficult to do. Polls will be open from 7 to 7 on June 11th, and I'm hoping to see a very wonderful voter turnout.
Are you pleading?
Are you pleading? Yes.
Kinda sounds like you're
Because
pleading.
that'll be what's in the paper. That you pleaded again.
Is that the Port Orange Observer said that, I'm not pleading, I'm just
Reminding.
reminding everybody, this
like
is,
a
be
plea
Port
to
Orange proud, let's show up and vote. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.